All right, good morning, algebra class. I know that you guys are doing some distance learning this morning. So I'm sharing the screen with you and I'm going to go through what we have been learning in class these last couple of days. So today we're going to talk about forms of line and equations. This is lesson 2, and we're going to talk about standard form, point slope form, and slope-intercept form, which you already have some experience with. So I want you guys to think about how are the point slope and the slope intercept forms of line equations, how are they related? Hopefully that you notice that they both include the word slope, so you know you are determining slope. And lines can be represented in many forms of equations, and one form is point slope form, which only requires a given point and the slope of a line in order to write the equation. All you need is an ordered pair, and then all you need is the slope of an equation. And I'm going to show you what I mean. In this example, we need to have an x1 and a y1. So let's make your x1 2.33, and let's make your y1 1.78. Let's move this. Let's move this to a manageable point. Maybe it won't let us do that. All right, so we have 2 points. We have an ordered pair. We have 2.33, which is x, and 1.90, which is y. These are your ordered pair points. And we need the slope of your line, we're going to make it 3.333. So these are the only numbers that you need. Notice this looks like a whole lot like what we've been looking at with graphs. So in point slope form, you just put it into the equation. And by now you already have the equation. Y minus y1, which is your y1 is right here, which is your 1.90. Here's your y. Here's your x. Make sure you label it. And then it equals, here's your slope, here's your m, which is your slope. And the equation is y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. So the first thing you definitely have to do is you have to distribute. So we distributed 3.33 times x, which is this, and 3.33 times 2.33. And then, of course, we had to move our 1.90 to the other side. So we had to add 1.90 to the other side. Let's erase these. All right, and this is what if your x equals 0. So they went ahead and they moved it. So your point is 2, and then your other point is 0. So this is just a brief overview on how you do it. So now we're going to get into the nuts and the bolts of this. And you have a couple of quizzes assignments in Google Classroom along with a project where you have to write some of these things in point slope form. All right, again, and we talked about this equation right here. Here is the equation for point slope form. I know you have this in your notes. I know that you have this in your folders, in your yellow folders. Make sure you have an example of this written in your notebook, and it can be any example. It can be the one that I'm using right now in class, or it can be something from quizzes, whichever you decide to do. Because obviously you're going to have the answer to the quizzes equations that's going to give it to you, but you have to show me the steps and how you got it. So let's go ahead and step through this. Let's go ahead and walk right through this. And let's go ahead and get rid of this line right here. Okay. So the linear equation y minus y1 equals m, which is your slope, times x minus x1. That's written in point slope form. x1 and y1 are given points on a non-vertical line. That means it has to have a slope to it. Non-vertical, it means it has to have some kind of a slope. You know that this is going to have a negative slope because it's going downward. So let's go ahead and talk about what this looks like in an equation. All right, so step one, you need to let x and y coordinates be x1 and y1. Step two, you need to substitute the values of m, x1 and y1 into the equation of the line. That's if you are writing it in point slope form. The other way is, that's if you're given the slope and you're given the point slope. So the other way is if you're just given 2 points. Well, first of all, you have to determine the slope. And when you determine the slope, of course, you guys should remember that it's the change in y over the change in x. And you have this equation, and we've used this equation many times. So first you have to determine the slope. Then you have to pick one of the ordered pairs, which it can be the xy2 ordered pairs, or the y, let me change that. This is not, this is x1. Sorry about that. This is x1. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You have to choose one of the ordered pairs, and then you put it back into this equation, because now you already have the slope for it. Okay, so here's your first example, and you can put this one into your notebooks if you want to. Of course, there's a fraction involved, so that's okay. And it looks like it's that graph that you saw in the first example when we started. And all you do is plug and play. That's all you do. Here is your ordered pair right here. Here's the ordered pair that they've given you. And of course, in your ordered pair, x is first, y is second. Make this a little bit better so that you know it's an x. X is first, y is a second, and you already know your m. And all they did was they inserted these things into the equation. They kept the y, they subtracted 7, because that's what it is in your ordered pair. It equals -3/2. This is your slope. In brackets, it's x minus, and they put the -2 in parentheses because you don't want to have a minus together. Rewrite it, x minus 7 equals -3/2 x plus 2. This is the equation for point slope form. They're not asking you to solve it. They're just asking you to put it into the equation. So that's the equation for it. So they're not asking you to solve it yet. So let's take a look at the next step. And of course, this is your slope. Let's get rid of the circles here. Your slope, of course, is going in a negative direction. So they just plotted the next 2 points is all they did. And then finally, you're going to move me out of the way. And then finally, they graphed it. So this is the graph of the equation y minus 7 equals -3/2 x plus 2. This is the graph of the equation. And all they did was they started at this point here, and they went down 1, 2, 3 over 2, put their next dot. Next one down 1, 2, 3. Here's where your line passes through, and all they did was graph it. Simple enough. That's the graph of point slope form. All right, so now what do you do? How do you write an equation in point slope form if they don't give you the slope? Well, you have to determine the slope. So of course, the equation is the change in y over the change in x. Make sure that you label, this is x1, this is y1, this is x2, this is x2, y2. Make sure that you label these so that you know where to insert these into the equation. And that's all you do. 5 minus 9 over 1 minus, in parentheses, -4. And of course, your slope is -4/5. Then what you need to do is you need to write an equation for it. So you need to choose, you can select either point, x1, y1, or you can choose x2, y2. It really doesn't matter which, but you have to decide. They're choosing x1 and y1. And then you just plug it into the equation. You know that y1 is 9, and your slope is negative 4/5. You determine that here. And then x minus x1, of course, you put the negative 4 in parentheses. And then you simplify this, meaning you just change this to a positive number. So this is your equation in point slope form. They're not asking you to solve it. They're just asking for the equation. And that's what it looks like. And then what you need to, here's another example. I want you guys to try this one. You can try this one. Stop the video, try this one, and see if you can get an equation that looks similar to this. And then, of course, you can certainly graph this equation if you want to. You can begin with this point here and then utilize your slope. You're going to go down 4 and over 5, and you'll get that slope of a line. So I want you to pause the video, and I want you to try to determine the slope and then put it in point slope formula. All right, hopefully you have shown all of these steps. Determine your slope first. Plug all the numbers in. They've chosen x1 and y1, and then simplify it. Really, all they did was change this from a negative to a positive. They simplified it. All right, so here's another way to look at it. You have to be able to switch equations periodically. Now they've given you this equation in what you just learned, which is point slope form. This is the equation in point slope form, and they want you to put this equation into slope-intercept form. Hopefully you remember that slope-intercept form is always y equals something, and now it's just a matter of moving things. So here's your original equation, which they just rewrote it, and then they want you to distribute. They want you to distribute the negative 2 to the x and distribute the negative 2 to the negative 6. And they got negative 2x plus 12. Of course, your next step is going to be to, well, this is the distributive property. And then they want you to subtract 4 from each side because you have to get the y by itself. So subtract 4 from each side. So you're going to subtract 4 just from the 12 because these are like terms. And then you end up with your answer, which is y equals negative 2x plus 8. So they took the point slope form equation and converted it to a slope-intercept form. All right, so now here's your final example from changing to different forms. So now they've given you an equation in, hopefully you recognize this is slope-intercept form. And they want you to take this equation and put it into standard form. Hopefully you remember from our last module that standard form is ax, a is just a number, plus b y, I apologize for my messiness, equals c. You already have this in your notes. A, b, and c are just numbers. And remember, this is usually your y-intercept. This right here is usually your y-intercept. C is your y-intercept. So I'm just going to write this over here on the side. Of course, they don't give you a y-intercept in this equation, but all they want you to do is convert a slope-intercept form into a standard equation. So really all you're going to do is you're just going to move things around. You want to get your x and your y together, and you want your constant by itself, your y-intercept by itself. So in this case, they want to subtract 4x from each side because you want your 4x to be with your y. So after they did that, you have a negative 4x plus y equals negative 9. Well, standard form, you can't have a negative x. So all they did was multiply both sides by negative 1. Whatever you do to this side, you have to do to that side. And then it gives you your positive 4x. Negative 1 times negative 4x is positive 4x. Negative 1 times positive y is negative y. Negative 1 times negative 9 is 9. So you've just converted a slope-intercept form equation into a standard form equation. Now I want you to also take a look at this equation is in point slope form. Y minus 1 equals negative 2/5 x plus 3. They want you to convert this equation into standard form. Same thing, same steps. You're going to distribute first, which is what you did the last time. Not distribute, I'm sorry. You're going to multiply both sides by 5 because you want to get rid of this denominator in a fraction. So whatever you do to this side, you have to do to that side. And they multiplied it by a positive 5 because opposite of negative is positive. So multiply 5 by this side and multiply 5 by this side. All this does is get rid of the denominator. This is your new equation. Negative 2x plus 3, 5y minus 5 equals negative 2x minus 6. They distributed the 2. And then we have to get our 2 over here with the y. So they added 2x to both sides. 2x plus 5y equals negative 1. This equation Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the negative 5. They added 5 to this side to get negative 1, and then they subtracted the 2x to this side to get 2x plus 5y equals negative 1. So this equation in point slope form, this is the standard equation for it. Please pause the video and write these examples down in your notes. Make sure that you know exactly how they do it, and we'll practice some more of this, or you have quizzes that practice this in class. You need to go to your Google Classroom, do the assignment for after lesson 5-2 for slope, and then choose 2 problems from each quizzes, show each step and how you solved it, and then check your solution via quizzes.